Alright, so Vanquish, which released October 18th of 2010 and was developed and distributed by Sega, and it was also just remastered in February 17th of 2020, so it was remastered about 10 years exactly after it released originally. So Vanquish, as I said, developed and distributed by Sega, is a third-person futuristic sci-fi action shooter, and the story is basically a save the world future story featuring characters of Sam Gideon, Robert Burns, and Elena being the central trio of characters alongside their military group and combating a villain. And basically, what I just summarized for the game and the story is basically what Vanquish is. So, getting into the story, extremely generic plot, extremely generic story, poorly written, way too rushed, on casual auto, which is the easiest difficulty, took me 3 hours and 2 minutes. Then you unlock the hardest difficulty, God Hard. I'd say even on that, take off the auto aim, you're looking at, I'd say 8 hours max. That's an issue. When a story is relatively 8 hours at most on the hardest difficulty, that's an issue. That's poorly written, nowhere near enough development in any of the structure, story, character, anything, the world. Nothing is compelling in the story. It's just a world, a futuristic world that is getting ravaged, and you are Sam Gideon, and you need to save it with your group and crew, and there are plot twists around the end, but with so little that they do with the story and the characters, nothing has context at the end. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They have a cliche end. They have not even a cliche villain. Not even a cliche villain. It's just an absence of villain. There's a villain, but he's just a caricature of a villain. There is nothing having to do with any form of a well thought out villain. It is just a generic sci-fi villain with absolutely no depth. He has no context, no concise thing pertaining to the story. He's just there near the beginning to kind of just be there, and then he's just kind of there at the end. And ultimately, throughout the story, it's the same. It's just a generic story with generic characters. Nothing is fleshed out. There's barely any world building. They really don't even describe the world. They don't really describe the characters. They don't really describe anything. So far, this is a bad review. Gameplay-wise, it actually has some innovative ideas in the gameplay, especially at the beginning when you start to play the tutorial and it teaches you how to play, and the the sliding mechanic with your rocket boost and the slowdown time, and how they juxtapose the slowdown with not automatically dying whenever you're at the limit for your health, and actually giving you like a second reprieval, a second chance. And I did like those features. Unfortunately, the gameplay is so mind-numbingly repetitious in just the 3-hour time limit of the story. It's so repetitious. They don't even focus on the good aspects of the gameplay. They just revert to standard, extremely generic third-person action shooter, just auto aim or just aim in general and shoot. Now, I can say the best part of this game are the boss fights. The boss fights are actually very well done. You aim for certain parts of the boss, and at least in my gameplay, you shoot down a limb of the boss and then they fall, and you got to go for the heart or the core of it, and you just kind of rinse and repeat. But it's still something a little more varied in the gameplay. But ultimately, there's nothing really of varying value in this. It's just a third-person action shooter. It's a very generic, repetitious one at that. The end credits, they basically vary the gameplay and make it an on-rails outer space shooter for the credits. And like I appreciate that, but I'm also wondering where was the variance in the gameplay throughout the whole entire game, not just the end credits. The game is just so mind-numbingly repetitious, generic, extremely bland. Everything about Vanquish is extremely bland. And this is one of those times where the critics need to be called into question, because this got rave reviews from critics, and I don't understand why. IGN giving it an 8.5, GameSpot giving it a 9 out of 10. Okay, it's a 3-hour, extremely generic third-person futuristic sci-fi action shooter. That's it. End of story. That is all you can say about this game, and you've 100% nailed exactly what Vanquish is. Ultimately, for me, at first, at the beginning, I thought it was a 7 to 8. Then I continued playing. It dropped to a 6. And by Act 3, it was down to a 5. By the end, I was sitting at a 4 out of 10. So for me, Vanquish Remastered on PS4 Pro. And it doesn't have HDR, but it does get upscaled to 4K. But also, too, I have to also say, the cutscenes are also very unbalanced. Throughout the entire story, the cutscenes look so grainy. They look awful compared to the gameplay. The gameplay looks good, but the cutscenes look so grainy. But then it's the very last couple cutscenes. I'd say the whole entire last act, the cutscenes actually hold on par with the gameplay visuals. So even the good cutscenes are kind of comparably bad, because you have to compare the rest of the game's cutscenes with those. So, like I said, Vanquish Remastered for me is a 4 out of 10. Thank you.